that climate change contributes to the frequency of these fires. So many fires, all popping up in different areas. Only one reason: climate is changing. The earth is hotter, the earth is drier. And that's why it's happened. You can't attribute these to human accident or anything like that when so many occur at once in so many different places. And that's obvious to most everyone, but not to the man in the White House. President Trump suggested idiotically that the planet will start getting cooler, just you watch. Sound familiar? This is like COVID's a hoax and it'll go away when the weather gets warmer. This man has no knowledge about anything, and yet he just spouts. But he's President of the United States, and his spouting creates real danger for people. And when California's National Resource Agency had told him that science disagreed with him, I don't think science knows. I don't think science knows. It is incredible the damage this man does with his nasty ignorance. It's not just ignorance, it's not innocent ignorance. He thinks by talking about this, playing down these problems, people will ignore them. But people have died and people's houses are on fire, and a large part of the country is inhaling smoke that is dangerous to them. So what the president's doing is disturbing. It's not new. His MO is to ignore reality and think it'll go away. You'd think COVID would have taught him the lesson, but I will tell you this. Not preparing for climate is going to be much, much worse even than not preparing for the evil COVID virus. The damage that climate will do to our planet, as bad as COVID is going to be multiple times worse. And what's the president? This is what the president is doing about climate and fires in the West is reminiscent of what he did on COVID. Ignore it, downplay it, deny it, and make it worse. And Mr. President, for 4 years you've done nothing on climate, and the results are in part that things are getting worse and worse and worse. Pandemics don't magically disappear. Climate change doesn't magically disappear. When is he going to get that into his head? When is some knowledge going to get through the orange hair and into his brain? It's just galling. Galling. He just doesn't grasp basic scientific facts. And the Senate Republicans, once again, go right along with Donald Trump. There's almost no difference between his ignorance and their followership. Senate Democrats, on the other hand, understand that protecting our planet is a moral obligation. Democrats are committed to creating clean energy jobs, building resiliency in any infrastructure bill. And just last week, I joined with Senator Markey and many grassroots organizations to introduce the Thrive resolution that would create millions of new jobs in renewable energy and make new investments in Black, Hispanic, and indigenous communities that have been hurt worst by climate. So, we all know what's happening here. The president denies COVID and climate change for political reasons. The Republican Party is dominated all too much by oil, gas, and coal interests, and that gets them to deny science. And in the same vein, President Trump is poisoning the wellspring of our democracy for the same reason, his own political benefit. As my colleague Senator Klobuchar will add in a few moments, we're committed to ensuring state election officials have the resources they need to administer the 2020 election. We know that climate change, COVID, the erosion of our democracy will only get worse if we fail to act. So we will not, Senate Democrats will not stand by as the president rejects science, spreads information, and causes great, great harm to the American people as he does it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Klobuchar, who has another, what is it, a committee hearing? committee hearing, antitrust committee hearing at the same time. So she's going to go first, and then she'll have to leave.
Okay. Thank you so much, Senator Schumer. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you, Senator Merkley. We all are thinking of the people of your state, the first responders, people who are having trouble even breathing right now on the West Coast. This is a pretty serious thing. And I would agree with what Vice President Biden said when he said this president is truly a climate arsonist. And I've been hearing a lot in my state of Trump ads and the like, where he keeps talking about safety. Well, I think there's an easy retort to that, and that is truly, Mr. President, are we safer? Are we safer when the West Coast is ablaze, acres, and people are dying? Are we safer when this virus, we keep seeing more and more people dying, and I have to go visit my own dad when he has COVID behind a glass door, not knowing if I'm ever going to see him again? Are we safer? Are we safer when we see the divide in our country? This is all under his watch, and I think it's a pretty straightforward argument to make. And then the final thing that he's trying to do, which our leader asked me to address today, is our very democracy. And he's not going to destroy that. I know he's not going to destroy it because I've seen the overwhelming number of people that are voting across this country. He's going to try, but he's not going to do it. That's because we have seen so many people, even in the middle of this pandemic, exercising their right to vote. It started with those people in Wisconsin who wanted to find a safe way to vote, but it was at the beginning of the pandemic, the courts went against them, and there were droves of people standing in line in homemade masks and garbage bags in the rain just to exercise their right to vote. The estimates in the press is 70 of them got coronavirus, including people who were working the polls. We can do better than that. That's why, with Senator Schumer's leadership, we have been working so hard to get funding that's in the HEROES Act, that passed the House, that's been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. That is one way, and we still could use some of that funding. We could use it for poll workers, to train them and hire them. It is not too late. We could use them to help our states pay for the elections. What he has been doing to undermine our elections is this, and I am pleased that there are Republican senators like Mitt Romney who stand up for the safety of voting by mail. I'm pleased there's Republican governors that have been willing to work with us, but not Donald Trump and not Mitch McConnell. What Donald Trump has been doing, it's really twofold. One is to undermine our elections by spreading disinformation, telling people in North Carolina that they can vote twice, to the point where their attorney general had to actually come out and say, you can't do that, it would be a felony, so that the people of his state don't get in trouble with the law. That happened. He has been undermining our elections by sending out misinformation about the vote by mail in really every state, although he claims it's still safe to do in Florida, which is a state that he does it in. The second way he spread disinformation is by not taking on outside influences and countries like Russia. We know what Russia did in 2016. They did it by trying to hack into the election equipment of every state in the country. In Illinois, they got as far as the voter lists. And then they did it through disinformation in such a big way. The social media companies, the topic of the hearing I'm about to return to, the social media companies this year have actually come out and said, this is happening right now. They've put it forward. I think they should be doing more. That's a subject for another day, but they have come out and said it. Donald Trump has not done that. In fact, he's stopped our access to briefings by his own director of intelligence. So our job as Americans and our job as senators is to put the right information out there, to direct people to their Secretary of State's websites, to make sure they know what the rules are. In my state, early balloting starts this coming Friday. We have one of the longest time periods, 40-some days of early voting in person, as well as being able to mail in your ballots until the day of the election. I just ordered mine, and there are people from all over the country that are doing the same thing right now. So we are on the side of truth and democracy. I just did a video today for Tom Ridge's group. There are a bunch of Republicans that are standing with us on keeping our democracy strong. And I just want you to remember that when you hear the disinformation, don't repeat it. Take them on by telling the truth. Otherwise, we have what happened in 2016. I'll leave you with this lasting image of an African-American woman, innocent woman. Her face was put on an image that was sent all over Facebook pages in African-American areas of our country. It wasn't a paid ad, it was an image. And it said, "Why wait in line to vote for Hillary? You can text your vote at 86153, or some set of numbers." To me, that's a crime, but that happened all over the country in 2016. We're not going to let it happen this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and on to your hearing.
On to my hearing.
And we
Thank
will
you.
hear from Senator Merkley,
Okay, thank you.
who does not have a hearing at the moment.
Thank you.
Apocalyptic. That's the word that kept reverberating through my mind as I traveled 600 plus miles this last weekend, going from our northern border, southern border, and back again, visiting centers to assist the refugees from the fires, visiting fire command operations, and touring 2 towns, Phoenix and Talent, that were absolutely incinerated by the fires. The fires had an unusual circumstance. Hot spell created east winds that came over the top of the Cascades, hit those fires, turned them into a blowtorch. They ran down the Santiam Valley and the McKenzie River Valley. They ran down through Medford and the Applegate area. Utter destruction. And we're going to have to do a lot of help for those families. Right now, the ones who escaped with their lives, their first response is, I'm out, my family's out. Unless they have family members they can't find, which many can't. So that's still going on. And then you have the utter, complete loss of every single thing they own, every memory, every file. Many of them, the places that they worked, have burned down, lost their jobs. We have to, as a country, stand with them and help put them back on their feet. We need to help rebuild those communities. This is the type of support that I hope President Trump and our Republican colleagues will join us in supporting those families and those communities. So there are 2 factors that really play into this. One is forest management. There is no question our second growth forests, where everything's the same height, where all the trees are close together, they are a problem. They are fires waiting to happen. And clear cutting them doesn't help because they just grow back up too close together, same height, fires waiting to happen. Getting rid of environmental laws does not solve the problem. Forest management, thinning with vegetation management, prescribed burns does help, but it takes resources. Time and time again, we've asked for those resources only to be thwarted by our Republican colleagues who say, no, let's eviscerate our environmental laws. They have to quit holding our communities hostage and work for us, with us, in partnership with us for the solution on forest management. But do not think for a moment forest management is enough. Even those areas that were widely spaced were still susceptible to fires of this catastrophic nature. Global warming is a challenge. Climate chaos is a challenge. And it's things you can measure. The scientists measure it all the time and tell us what's happening. The snowpack in Oregon, way down over the last 3 decades. The fire season, much longer over the last few decades. The dryness of the forests, much drier over the last few decades. All of this combines. The ocean much warmer, the ocean much more acidic. All these things can be measured in Oregon, and we know why. Methane, carbon dioxide, heating up the planet. So we have to work together to take this on. Let's just know we have to have a rapid transition to renewable energy that doesn't produce carbon or methane, and we have to lead the world in the same, because this is a tragedy of the commons on a planetary scale. So American leadership in the world is absolutely essential, but it has to happen first by us getting our own house in order. The President did, as Leader Schumer noted, basically say, I see nothing, I hear nothing, it will solve itself. Well, 200,000 Americans within a week will have died from coronavirus, a massive amount more than otherwise, because the President refused to address the issue head on. This issue, with planetary impact of climate, far greater, far worse, it needs leadership from the top and at every level, and that's what we're intent on providing.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. I have a statement which I meant to read about the statement on the ICE detention whistleblower. Okay? The horrific conditions described at ICE facilities in the latest The horrific conditions described at ICE facilities in the latest DHS whistleblower complaint harken back to similar atrocities that the entire world committed to never let happen again. As any student of history knows, brutal dictators, nationalists, have used forced hysterectomies to oppress, punish, and erase marginalized populations for centuries. This has no place in any society, much less at the hands of the United States government. The DHS Inspector General must immediately launch an investigation into this complaint. Americans need to know what happened to women and girls in these detention facilities and, if verified, who is responsible for pushing these invasive medical procedures. And if these horrific reports are true, we as a nation have an obligation to bring those responsible for this unquestionable violation of human rights to justice. Ready for questions on our subjects? Yes.
Leader Schumer, Mitch McConnell yesterday, he called he described Democrats discussing eliminating the legislative filibuster as grade A hypocrisy because the Democrats used it to stop the Tim Scott policing bill and then the COVID relief. And how do you respond to him?
Well, I responded as I've responded over and over again. Should we get the majority, we know America needs strong and bold change. And we will figure out the way to do it. Nothing's on the table, nothing's off the table. Have to wait till we get the majority before we can decide what to do and under what conditions and how many votes we have the majority. Yes?
Thanks, Leader Schumer. The Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan group in the House, has unveiled their own coronavirus aid package that's more moderate than what the Democrats have put out, but provides more state aid, for example, than what the Senate Republicans have proposed. Would you entertain this plan, and would you, how do you look at it?
The Speaker and I stand by our position. We're willing to meet the President in the middle.
Does the President deserve credit for the Abraham Accords that were signed today at the White House?
Look, normalization of the relations between Israel and other countries is welcome news, but I want to see the details of the agreement. I've always said for a long time that it's long past due for nations in the region to normalize relations with Israel.
Republicans are accusing Democrats of sowing vaccine hesitancy because some Democrats have raised questions about Operation Warp Speed, its potential political influence, its lack of transparency. How do you respond?
If the President had any modicum of fidelity to science, no one would have any doubts. The American people have overwhelming doubts. 70% of Americans are worried that the President will the administration will rush the vaccine before it's medically proven. We just want science to govern. No political interference one way or the other. Next.
Speaker Pelosi said today that the House is going to stay in session until there's a COVID bill. Do you think the Senate should do the same, and do you expect...
Well, you'll have to ask Leader McConnell, but they stayed in session last time after they passed the HEROES bill, and they were, they didn't adjourn. They recessed, and they were willing to come back. I believe the Senate, if there's an agreement, should come back and pass it right away. But we have to have an agreement, and we have to have the President meet us in the middle. Wait, we want to go to people who haven't asked. Everyone's asked. You each get one more, and then we'll go.
May I first?
Please.
A lot of numbers are being thrown around for what each side may want for the coronavirus aid amount. Can you please be a little more specific about what you mean when you say in the middle? What is in the middle?
We said we came down $1 trillion from our 3.4, and they should go up $1 trillion.
That's not the middle, though. So can you
Yes,
be
it is
more
the middle.
specific?
That's exactly the
Is
middle.
that between what the Republicans and the Democrats want middle, or
Next
half
question.
of what you asked
Next
for?
question.
Leader Schumer, last week you expressed optimism that Senate Republicans would come to the table. Have you seen any signs of that, and do you think the Senate will leave in October without a deal?
Well, look, I hope we can get a deal. It's really up to the President. As I said, we have agreed to come down $1 trillion, they come up $1 trillion, and then we're close. That's very clear. And the bottom line is they haven't done that yet. In fact, the Senate regressed and went from their $1 trillion to $500 billion. Until they're willing to meet us in the middle, we're not going to be able to solve the problems of the American people. Okay, thanks, everybody.